James, can you reach that?
Reach what?
The bread up there.
On the top shelf? Yeah, for sure.
No, up there.
What's it doing on the ceiling?
Plugging a hole.
What?
I just needed to block it with something, but now I want to feed the ducks, and that's the only bread in the house.
Well, why is there a hole in the ceiling?
Well, the light used to be there.
And what happened to the light?
The ducks needed it.
Come again?
The ducks needed it.
Well, that's nice, I suppose, Walt. Maybe the ducks get scared when in the dark when the lights get turned off at the park, but we need a light in our house.
Yes, the park ducks. The ducks at the park. That's where they are. At the park, as they always have been.
Yes. Right. Give me the light back, you fluffing ducks! I wouldn't put it past you to bring ducks into the house.
I have considered it, honestly.
Ducks, apparently they're great pets.
I can believe that.
But as a public service announcement, you shouldn't feed them bread.
No, you shouldn't.
I'm glad that I remembered that
Yes.
because we might have accidentally told people to feed bread to ducks. But you really shouldn't.
If you're going to feed them bread, at least make it not the bread that is blocking the hole in your ceiling where the light used to be. That would be my recommendation if you're going to do bread.
Ceiling bread, bottom tier. Sourdough loaf, top tier.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG. Ponces?
Ponces?
Ponces.
We've upgraded our partnership.
We've got
sponsors.
You've heard of sponsors.
And now we've got Ponces.
Get rid of some sponsors. Sponsor of this podcast, Palms Off Gaming, where I like her do da cha cha. I'm your host, Walt.
Hello, Commander players. I prefer a samba. James.
Sure.
I don't know where we're going with these intros anymore. Sometimes I'll see what you've written down as what you want to say as an idiot, and then I'll be like, I've got nothing.
More
I'm just going to do what you did again.
Mine was a Bruce Almighty quote, actually.
I think mine's another Jim Carrey thing. I knew what yours was.
Yep,
I'm pretty sure in some film, Jim Carrey goes, the samba.
That sounds
It might be The Mask, actually.
It feels like it probably could have happened in The Mask, for sure.
That tracks, right?
He does, specifically that whole dance routine involving maracas.
I like the Cuban beats.
Yes,
that one.
Before we get to the transmission, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is an important one, specifically at the moment. Walt and I are in what we're referring to kind of loosely as phase 3 of Get Commanded. Really early on was phase 1 when we just kind of did it for the community group.
Yep.
When we were in phase 2 before the hiatus of really ramping up the game in terms of the professionalism, the quality, that kind of thing. And phase 3, we want to do more.
Yeah.
Much more. You've already got a sense of this because we do the monthly Meteor now, which is a video news show podcast where Walt and I keep you up to date with what's going on in EDH because, let's be real, in the last month, there's been a lot.
There's a lot happening.
But yeah, we're looking at adding more to the repertoire on YouTube.
Yeah, look, we're looking into the possibility of having the gameplay that we play on our stream be much more tightly edited. At the moment, the videos are going up. They got a cool intro and everything, but they tend to be pretty much the entire length of the video. We know that a lot of you prefer that sort of 40-minute, 50-minute kind of gameplay. I know that I do that when I'm looking for YouTube videos of gameplay.
Yeah, if I've got a choice between watching a 2-hour Commander game on YouTube and a 50-minute episode on YouTube.
I'm choosing 50 minutes every day.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
But yeah, we're still going to be posting skit content, as some of you would have seen on TikTok and Instagram, but also on YouTube Shorts, of course. And yeah, more stuff like the Meteor, I feel like. You know, that kind of keeping you up to date on stuff. Little short form, topical, and little, just sort of guides, sort of condensed versions of some of the things we've said on our podcast. Like, people have often asked for our deck building template, if that could be available in a better way.
Instead of a huge 2-hour long
instead of sending people to an hour long.
Which we are hearing, and we 100% agree. And sometimes audio podcasts aren't for everyone.
No.
We know that we have a great audience of audio listeners. Hello to you specifically, the person listening to this right now. But we we really do want to grow what we're doing. So go subscribe to the YouTube channel because we are really looking for more stuff to go up there. And I think the end of this year in 2025 is going to be a pretty cool thing on Get Commanded's YouTube.
Yeah, it's going to be a real focus for us. But we do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Ceilings and floors define the power level of every Commander deck.
All right, defining power level.
Yes.
We all know that WotC has got their bracket system out.
Yes.
I think the Space Commanders have something different in mind.
Yeah. This is also a very short command.
Yeah, they are straight to the point with this one.
Yeah, they just want to talk about ceilings and floors.
Which is language we use a lot.
Yeah.
But we've never really talked about it in length.
Not explicitly.
We use it in almost every episode. Like the ceiling of this car is so high.
And the floor of this card is so high.
Yeah, but I don't think we've ever defined what those terms actually mean.
No, and it's interesting that they think this is going to define power level. So I'm really interested to dive into this and see how we can work out what they're getting at here. So yes, as you say, we're always talking about ceilings and floors, but just in case you needed to sort of catch up, the usual use of the word floor, and certainly the way that we use it in the context of Magic, is talking about the worst case scenario when using any given card. So, for example, Panharmonicon's floor is nothing at all. If you have a Panharmonicon, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have an enter the battlefield trigger. It doesn't draw you a card. It doesn't do anything at all. It's just an artifact that sits there until you get something else. So the floor of Panharmonicon, the worst case scenario of it, is nothing.
Yeah, think about when you're in, top deck mode and you're like, facing down a board full of creatures that are going to swing at you. You top deck this card, Panharmonicon. That does nothing for you. And keep in mind, we're saying floor as in FLOOR,
yes.
not FLAW.
That is important to say. It's not a flaw of the card that it doesn't do anything.
It is the floor, the thing beneath your feet. Yes, the lowest it could be.
Importantly, though, I feel like the thing that the Space Commanders are getting at here, which we'll dive into maybe in the latter half of this, is that a deck can also have a flaw, which would sort of be the worst possible draws in a row from the top of your library. So I'm not saying like land screw or like getting flooded or anything like that. It's more like, we often talk about the knight/equipment problem.
If the deck was performing at the base level of what this deck should be doing, this is what it's doing.
What's a sequence of cards you could conceivably draw off the top where it kind of wouldn't do nearly as much as it normally does? Like, what's the least this deck can do that's not, drawing nothing but lands?
Yeah.
We talk about the knight/equipment problem where you draw only some knights or only some equipment, and in this case, your deck has zero synergy, doesn't do anything at all. This would sort of be the flaw of the knight/equipment deck.
That's a great example. I think, the absolute flaw of your Seguin deck would be drawing a handful of equipment and no knights to equip.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, cool, I've got a Swiftfoot Boots, I've got this Colossus Hammer, I've got this Volshock Morningstar, and I have nothing at all to do with it. And the equipment do nothing when they're not on a creature. Don't know if you know that about creatures and equipment before.
I actually think that would be okay for Seguin, because at least you could still equip Seguin.
Yeah, you'd cast Seguin
maybe the
and
worst
then
version
everything
is,
on her.
Yeah, maybe the worst version is having a bunch of knights and no equipment.
I would say so.
That's the worst version.
Most of the knights in my deck are like 1/2s with double strike.
Protection from black.
Yeah, protection from black. And it's like, oh, I've got the best blocker. This is the best blocker.
This is really good against you, Crick player.
Yeah, exactly.
So the opposite end of this spectrum is the ceiling. And this is like I would say this is almost in the realm of Magical Christmas Land. This is the best case scenario for when we're referring to any given card. Like, for example, Panharmonicon was the example we used with the floor. Panharmonicon's ceiling is like doubling a Craterhoof Behemoth ETB, or like doubling the Atali ETB of like exiling cards off the top and casting them. Like, there are cards that in combination with Panharmonicon make Panharmonicon a ridiculously powerful card.
Yeah, like you can imagine the best enter the battlefield effect you could possibly have in a game.
Yeah.
Panharmonicon can double that.
I mean, imagine like even more best case scenario. We're raising the ceiling even more here for Panharmonicon. We cast Last March of the Ents. and we draw a shitload of cards and put all of these creatures onto the battlefield with all of these
10
enter the
different enter the
battlefield.
battlefield effects.
And
Doubles.
now we have 20 of them. Like, that is exponentially powerful.
Yes, so that's absolutely, like, the ceiling of a card like Panharmonicon is, as high as you can imagine, more or less.
But yeah, it clone Craterhoof 30 times. Now you've got 60 enter the battlefield triggers. It gets stupid after a while.
It does get silly.
There is kind of like a theoretical ceiling, right? Because like a lot of people talk about like the glass ceiling, like this is as high as you can go.
Yeah.
But let's be real, we're playing Magic in 2024. A new set will come out and it'll make a card ceiling higher.
And that can happen, and that's definitely something that factors into when you're building a deck.
Yeah.
As with the floor, though, it's important to note that a deck can also have a ceiling, and this is the best possible draws you could have in a row. So, like, if you are playing a deck that contains Bloom Tender and contains a Pemon's Aura, which you can pay a blue to untap the enchanted creature, if your Bloom Tender is producing blue and any other color of mana,
you're sorted.
You have an infinite mana combo in your deck just by including those two, and so the ceiling of your deck is infinite mana.
I mean, like, for example, I was playing a game a couple of weeks ago with you at the kitchen table, and my opening hand in my blue-black Reanimator deck contained an Entomb and a Reanimate.
Yeah.
Both one-drop black spells that put a creature in the graveyard and then reanimate that creature.
Yeah.
That is the ceiling of that deck. Like, I got an 8-drop out on turn 2 that gave me an extra upkeep, untap, and draw.
I don't think there's anything that deck could have done better than that. Like, maybe if you had another 1-drop on turn 2 that you could have done.
Gravecrawler.
There it is.
Then just set up a loop and win on turn 2.
I guess you could have gone turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 2 Entomb.
Reanimate.
No, because then you only have colorless. Anyway, it's pretty much the best that you could possibly get. But the ceiling of that deck is quite high because the ceiling is the best creature in my deck on the battlefield on turn 2.
Yeah. Just by containing those 2 cards, it means that the ceiling of my deck is that scenario.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the way that the Space Commanders want us to talk about this, because I want to talk about this in particular, I reckon this might relate a little bit to the power level brackets.
I 100% agree.
The Space Commanders that were announced by Wizards of the Coast shortly after they took the reins of the Commander format.
I said it before. It did sound like the Space Commanders were like taking... not a gripe with this, but they said that ceilings and floors define every Commander deck's power level. So I think that they're kind of going after WotC for this.
Well, I think they are too, but we should explain where we're coming at this from, because I completely agree with you, but I think it makes sense within context. So WotC have announced tentative plans for a 4-bracket system. So this would be a supporting document, would not be mandatory, they've said this, but this would be a way of sitting down with a group of people and making sure you're playing with the same sorts of power levels of decks. You can imagine that, for instance, we've both been to Commander conventions before. Sometimes there's a sign that says CEDH in the corner where people know if they go there, they can play some competitive Commander over there.
That's like a beacon of, if you want this, come here.
Yeah, you can sort of imagine, I think this is probably where Wizards are coming at this from. They've got massive conventions that they have with massive Commander areas. They could go quite neatly, bracket 1, 2, 3, and 4, and people would know where to sit. So, like, conceptually, I like the idea.
I really like the idea. However, I did want to just touch on this from a convention standpoint.
Sure.
Because I have seen a lot of content creators talking about MagicCon Vegas coming up and people flying over for that.
Sure.
I think people are freaking out at the fact that this is going to be, like, enforced in a way. And let's be real, Commander is a casual format. You cannot enforce Commander.
No.
The first rule of Commander is rule 0.
Yeah.
You get to decide what is okay and what's illegal, what's legal in your pods, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think this is and I think people should stop coming at Wizards of the Coast with, like, they're trying to enforce me to play in a certain power level and with certain people. They're not. They're really not. All they are trying to do is the exact same as what our previous rules committee did, and they are trying to give more aids to players to give them the tools, and the language is a big part of this. The language to describe what their deck is about and if the pod is going to be right for them.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all they're going to do. But
absolutely.
I like the idea of at festivals, at Magic Cons, all that kind of stuff, to be able to say, I really just want to play in brackets 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go over here and then I'll have a pre-game conversation and make sure that the pod is right.
Yeah. The problem that we do come across, though, conceptually, it sounds really good. I agree. But the problem that has come about is that the way they described the way that your deck would fit into each of these brackets is they have spoken about the fact that if your deck contained a card that sits within a certain bracket, your deck is considered within that bracket. So we haven't received many examples because they have not committed to very much.
We've seen a few, though.
We have seen a few. So the examples that they gave was bracket 1 would be these are cards you would expect to see in any Commander game and you wouldn't really blink an eye if they appeared.
Like staples of the formats that aren't like, going to break any barriers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Grave Titan was an example and Swords to Plowshares was an example.
Yep, makes sense.
Pretty standard.
Big splashy 6-drop.
Yeah.
Commander's all about that.
Yeah.
And a efficient removal spell.
Yeah, that you see everywhere.
Yeah.
Like Swords to Plowshares is a very strong card, but it's not
printed in every precon.
Yeah,
really,
no one's going, oh my god, you've got Swords to Plowshares. It's
Yeah.
not a thing that's happening.
Sure.
Bracket 2, the examples they gave were Fabricate.
Well, that's a tutor.
That's a tutor for 3 mana. And Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. This is the one that the 2-drop that makes non-creature spells cost 1 more.
Okay, so tutors and a soft sax piece in bracket 2.
Yep.
A specific tutor, I will say. Fabricate only gets an artifact.
Only gets an artifact and costs 3 mana. So as far as tutors
and
go...
sorcery speed.
Yes, true.
So there's a lot about that card that balances itself. Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Bracket 3, another tutor appears, Personal Tutor.
Oh, yep.
And Draneth Magistrate
Oh,
appears
that's a
in bracket
hard
3.
stacks piece.
Yes, this specifically, as we know, stops you from casting your commander from the command zone because you can't cast spells from anywhere other than your hand.
Yep.
Personal Tutor, I think for 2 mana you get a blue instant into your hand.
I thought it was 1 mana.
It's something like that.
It's
Anyway,
got the
or it
art's
might go
got
on
an
top of
owl
your
on it.
library.
I think it's a sorcery speed mystical tutor, isn't it not? Isn't
that
what
could
personal tutor
be.
is?
I don't know. I'm
going to look it up.
Yeah, sounds good. In the meantime, bracket 4, and this is the top bracket. This is as high as it goes. The examples they gave were Armageddon, Destroy All Lands, and Vampiric Tutor. So this is the one single black tutor that tutors anything in your library to the top of your library and leaves it there.
About as powerful as you can get in terms of tutors.
Absolutely.
For comparison, Personal Tutor is a 1 blue sorcery for a search your library for a sorcery card, reveal it, put it on top of your library.
Okay, so slower than Vampiric Tutor, costs 1 more, only gets a sorcery.
And I think the tutors are really, really cool in this bracket system to look at. Like, there is a clear difference of the power level of these tutors, right?
I like that they're looking at them.
Yeah.
I like that they're acknowledging the power that a strong tutor can give to a deck. I mean, you just spoke about Reanimate and Entomb. Like, Reanimate...
1 black drop, tutor to the graveyard is really strong.
Yeah.
You've been on your high horse about this a million times.
I have.
But I really like how, this tier system, this bracket is like Fabricate, Personal Tutor, Vampiric Tutor. There are clear defining aspects of these cards that put them in certain buckets to me. Like sorcery speed, the searches for a specific thing.
Yeah.
And then the instant speed searches for anything.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think we would both agree that, outside of the context of using this to define what decks you should play, I think if me and you were to sit down and go, let's define the 4 different tiers of power of cards you can see in Commander, I don't think it would look dissimilar to what we have here, right?
No, I don't think... I think we would come up with the exact same results. Like, if we were to go, right, we're going to evaluate every card that is legal in Commander and put them into a bucket, I think our results... and pretty much anyone's results would line up pretty similarly to Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
However, this is the thing, right? You are assessing cards.
Yeah.
Not decks.
No.
You are looking at the power level of a particular card.
Yeah.
And that is 1 card in potentially 101 cards in a Commander deck, if you include the companion zone.
Sure. It's a real problem, though. Vampiric Tutor, we would both agree, is an extremely powerful card.
That is a tier 4,
but
S tier card.
Absolutely. But if your deck is using Vampiric Tutor to put Revenge of the Hunted on top in your Chevil Bane of Monsters deck... to make your opponents
those cards. Oh, Chevil is the Golgari bounty counter. Yes.
So and Revenge of the Hunted gives a creature +3/+3, and it must be blocked by all creatures.
Okay, I see what you're saying here.
It's a miracle card for reference.
Right.
So the context of I'm going to Vampiric Tutor for this bad miracle card in my bounty counters Golgari deck.
Yeah.
That doesn't really say the same thing as I'm going to Vampiric Tutor for Cyclonic Rift.
Or I'm going to Vampiric Tutor for the other half of the 2-card combo that I have in my
I'm going to go
hand.
find Pemenzora and go get infinite mana.
I'm going to go find the Tainted Pact exact Formo Thassa's Oracle.
Yes, absolutely.
They are two very different conversations, but by virtue of having a Vampiric Tutor in both of those decks, so far as we understand it, Wizards of the Coast might change this.
Absolutely,
remember, they very well could come out and say, we kind of scrapped the bucket system. It's terrible. But at the moment, the way WotC are telling us that they would sort these decks into power level is that both those decks, the Cheville Bane of Monsters deck and the, Rogsai deck would go in the same bracket, and it would be the same high bracket as bracket 4.
Well,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
If this is the way that we're going to be trying to find games with like-minded individuals, like imagine these two people sitting down to play with one another.
A Rogsai player and a Cheville Bane of Monsters player.
It feels like we're going right back to, like, this is where we are right now with the quality of resources we have. It's like, conceivably, these two people do play the same format, and so they can sit down at the same table. Yeah. There are things that stop that from happening. As we know, we've got a pre-game conversation we speak really highly about. But this system, as it currently stands, would kind of allow things like this to happen. So anyway, it's all to say that I think what the Space Commanders are getting at is that defining the power level of a deck will ultimately be more than a selection of the powerful cards that are within it. We're going to need to understand the ceilings and floors within the deck to understand where that all averages out and what kind of power level the deck actually sits within.
I could not agree with you and the Space Commanders more in this moment.
Good.
I love this angle. I think that the Space Commanders saying it defines the power level of every deck makes sense, because a card doesn't define an entire commander deck. Like, if you were to say a t-shirt defines your entire closet, like your entire wardrobe, I'd be like, you're wrong. Like,
there's like 80 other garments in there.
Yeah, I have a very varied fashion choice. Like, don't judge me based on my Vampiric Tutor. Judge me by my Cheville Bane of Monsters. Like, that is how...
It sounds like one of those phrases of like, if you don't love me at my Cheville Bane of Monsters, you don't deserve me at my Vampiric Tutor.
You don't deserve... I love it. Okay, I am on the train here, because I think that defining power levels, as we know, has been an unsolvable problem for the entire existence of Commander.
Absolutely.
Since the birth of Commander, power levels has been an impossible thing to try and solve.
Yeah.
In the next hour and a half, Walt and I are going to solve it. That's what I'm saying.
We're going to try. We're going to try really hard.
We're bringing more subjectivity into objective world, or we're bringing objectivity into subjectivity.
Sure. I'll take your word for it.
We're combining the two. Anyway, ceilings and floors.
Yeah, ceilings and floors. I think I want to talk about this in two different ways. I think that there will be two ways to talk about this. It's just sort of what we talked about when we talk about ceilings and floors in the first place. Obviously, cards can have ceilings and floors.
Yes.
And decks can have ceilings and floors.
Sure.
So I think let's start with the floors and ceilings that cards can have, because I do think this is going to define then the way that we approach the deck side of the episode.
I think it'll, especially if you've never used this language before, dear listeners, I think looking at very specific examples of cards are just going to help you understand this concept a little bit more.
Absolutely. So when we talk about card floors and ceilings, we're kind of talking about, in my mind, we're kind of saying consistency is the word that's hidden behind all of that, right?
We love that word on this podcast.
We do love that word on that podcast. We've spoken before, in the context of consistency, we've spoken about variance. And so in terms of floors and ceilings, I think that high variance cards that vary a lot in their use case scenario, are often cards that have low floors and high ceilings.
I think just by the nature of the design of the card, that's what it's trying to do.
Yeah, Cascade, for instance.
That's a great example, yeah.
The Cascade, when you cast a spell with Cascade, you reveal cards on top of your library. So you reveal a non-land card that costs less, and then you can cast it without paying its mana cost. By virtue of the fact that you're revealing from the top of your library, it's usually random, and you don't know what you're going to get.
Vampiric Tutor makes that a lot better.
My Sheffield Bane Monsters deck is so much better now.
But cards that are designed around like dice rolling or coin flipping. Like the card that I look at, for example, is Stitch in Time. This is 1 blue and a red. You flip a coin. If you win the flip, take an extra turn. A 3 mana extra turn spell.
Yeah.
High ceiling.
Yes. Unbelievably high ceiling. Like you're in the realm of Time Warp.
Yes. 3 mana do nothing. Incredibly low floor. Like, by floor, I mean mine shaft.
Yeah.
Like, straight down.
The underworld.
Into the core of the world.
Hades is beckoning you towards the River Styx.
But ceiling,
Yeah.
God is kissing your forehead.
Olympia.
Yeah.
Mount Olympus.
Zeus will bless you with a goblet of wine. But yeah,
Don't accept wine from Zeus. If I've learned anything about Greek mythology, do not do that.
all right, I'll take a note of that.
Yeah.
But I think cards with variants are designed very intentionally because they excite players. And
Absolutely.
I think that, even conditional board wipes, right? Like everything comes to dust in your Catilda and Lear deck. The ceiling of this is a one-sided board wipe that you cast for basically free.
You can cast it for free. Absolutely.
If you just convoke everything.
10 creatures that are white, or some number of them are white, you can cast it for free. Keep all of your creatures because they're usually the same type as everything comes to dust.
That's crazy good.
Yeah, I mean, even Austere Command, like, we know that the going rate for a board wipe is 4, right? 2 white, Wrath of God, Damnation, this kind of thing. Austere Command for 6 lets you choose the things you destroy. So the floor of this card, like, as a destroy all creatures, is... like, it's worse than Wrath of God.
It's a 6 mana destroy all creatures.
It's 6 mana Wrath of God.
In place of a 4 mana destroy all creatures.
It's worse. Like, the floor is definitely lower than with Wrath of God. But the ceiling of Austere Command and everything comes to dust is, I keep everything.
Yeah.
I destroy all the stuff you've got and keep all the stuff that I have. The variance of these cards is quite high, in other words.
I think that excites players, though. Like, in the same way clone cards are very dependent on what's on the battlefield.
Yeah.
These are theoretically, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Like, my phantasmal image could be a Tali.
Yeah.
For 2 mana.
Absolutely.
If my opponent controls an Atali, oh boy, I'm in business.
What's the Mirror Maid can come in as an enchantment, right?
Yes, Mirror Maid is the enchantment one, yeah.
Omniscience.
Oh, yeah, you could have a 3 mana Omniscience.
3 mana Omniscience.
You could straight up
it's
do
possible.
That. It is theoretically possible. You could also have it come in as, like, what do you call the Utopia Sprawl?
Yes.
Like, that is
That's
other
the
end.
floor,
That is
yes.
the floor of that,
I mean,
right?
the floor of a clone is sometimes itself, right?
Sakashima entering as Sakashima.
Yeah, there's no
The
other
3/1.
creatures on the board. Yeah, it's possible, right? I mean, even, like, there are cards that really imply this. Like, we were just building on the stream the other day a new version of my Marin deck where instead it'll be old stick fingers. And we were looking at the card Deathbloom Ritualist, and we were really hot on it for this particular deck. This is for 3 black-green, a creature that taps for a mana of any color for every creature card in your graveyard.
I was really hot on this card.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good deck for it, but you have to acknowledge that, like, it can be a 5 mana mana dork that doesn't produce anything.
Well, I mean, like, and its variance is, like, it could be a 5 mana mana dork that doesn't produce any mana because someone Bajuka bogged your graveyard. Or in the Old Stick Fingers deck is like, I've just cast Old Stick Fingers for 10, and I've got 10 creatures in my graveyard.
Yeah.
Now this mana dork taps for 10.
Yeah, 5 mana mana dork that produces 10. I mean, it keeps getting higher, right?
Yeah,
like 40 creature deck, you could have milled your whole deck and be like, oh, cool, 40 mana,
Yeah,
you know?
I should be able to win with that.
Yeah, you'd hope so, wouldn't you?
The ceiling is winning game.
Yeah.
Like, that's how impactful the variance is on this card.
And then the floor can be nothing. And so, yeah, we play cards like this, and we're not explaining this about high variance cards and saying don't play them, but this is what we're talking about when we're talking about ceilings and floors of cards.
But no,
these are low floor, high ceiling cards,
but
right?
yeah, I was even excited by the chat that we just had about this because I really like variance cards. I think it adds an element of fun to Commander.
Totally.
And there is completely valid reasons of including these cards with variance, because if you can... Let's be real. If you can leverage the variance and make it do the thing more often than it does the floor, like if you can hit the ceiling more often than the floor, that's the perfect card for the deck.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about making memorable Commander games, we spoke a lot about randomness. You know, cards like Chaos Warp, it's not dissimilar to something like Cascade, right? Like, I don't know what I'm going to get means I could get the best card in my deck. Like, it's a possibility that can happen. And those tend to be the games we remember, and they're the really great stories that we tell.
I think the opposite of this is the low variance cards, though.
Absolutely.
Like, these are the cards that are always doing the thing. Like, the consistency of these cards are the reason why we look at them and go, this is a good card.
Absolutely. I would say about low variance cards that often, in terms of ceilings and floors, a low variance card might have quite a low ceiling, but its floor is quite high. Or it kind of doesn't have a floor. You know what I mean? Like, they won't always be remarkable, but they will very rarely be bad.
If you can imagine it as a floor and ceiling, this room is like 3 centimeters high.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what you're going to get. You know, the room is small.
You are going to be within this range.
Yes.
And every game, you will, when you see this card, it will do that. Like,
Totally.
for example, like Rhystic Study is a card that comes to mind.
Absolutely.
Like, that card is great, and it has a, you know, pretty high ceiling, but it doesn't have a low, like, its floor is like people pay for it.
Yeah,
and the
its floor
of people,
is your opponent's spells cost 1 more to cast.
that's crazy.
That's a crazy
good.
effect on a 3-mana enchantment.
That is insanely good.
Yeah.
And then that is the worst it is.
Yeah.
Like, if it doesn't draw you any cards, Rhystic Study can feel bad, but what it's really doing is making your opponent's spells cost
That's
one
still
more.
really, really good.
Incredible.
I think most staples, often the reason that they are staples is that in all of the different contexts that this card can sit within, like all the different decks it could appear in, it's very rarely bad. Like, you know, Smothering Tithe is another one that comes to mind.
Yep.
Treasures are pretty much always good. Sometimes they're really great.
It's just giving you more mana.
Yeah, it's just more money. You can't really complain about that. We talk about unconditional creature removal like Path to Exile.
Yep.
Very consistent ramp spells, especially ones that cost 2 mana, 3 visits, Nature's Law, Farseek.
Yep.
Even efficient cantrips like Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm.
Yeah,
Like,
these do what they say on the tin.
yeah, there's no world where you cast Preordain and you don't find a card, right? You're scrying 2 and drawing a card. Like, you're looking at 3 cards. No matter what, you get a card.
Yeah.
There's not that you might find bad cards on top of your library, but you know what? You scryed them now.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah, I think that I kind of view these cards, like low variance cards, as like, these are the cards that if someone was to say, you're trapped on a desert island, what cards are you taking to a desert island? I would make sure I have a couple of these cards in my collection to make sure I'm going to play Commander. You know, like, I don't want to take just high variance cards.
Yeah.
Because then I'm playing roll dice deck.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, this is the thing. Like, a deck with only high variance cards has always the potential of doing nothing.
Yeah.
A deck with only low variance cards, the only thing that's at risk is that it's boring. Like, the worst it can do is all your cards do what you expect them to do. That's pretty good.
yeah,
You can't really complain.
No. You could probably accuse someone for just hitting the export average deck button on EDH Rec, though.
Absolutely. I think the average deck would do that. But yeah, like, and
Yeah.
you may get bored of it. And so, you know, we're not saying play one, play the other. But yeah, there's a reason that these cards are staples, and it's often that the floor is so low. I would say, like, in general, try not to rely too heavily upon high variance cards for things that your deck absolutely needs to function.
Yeah,
I think
ramp and card draw.
ramp, card draw, even removal. Like, I see people play removal spells that, like, only destroy, like, one card type. Like, it's like destroy target enchantment. And I'm like, that you could almost certainly in most colors have destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Yep.
We have cards like Generous Gift and Beast Within, destroy target permanent.
Even
you know.
cards like, is it Get Lost? The new
Oh, destroys a creature or enchantment.
Or
I think.
enchantment, and they make 2 map tokens?
Yeah, they make 2 maps.
That's
Yeah.
great.
It's an
Start
excellent
running
card.
that in your Commander decks.
Totally.
It's great. It's expensive at the moment because it's in standard, but
Yeah, it'll come down.
give it a couple of years.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think that in general, like, raising the floor for the cards within your deck will also raise the floor for the entire deck, because your random draws off the top of your library now are just on average slightly better, right?
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of
Yeah.
an entire deck,
Yeah.
I think this leads perfectly into talking about the decks as a whole with this context of ceilings and floors in relations to cards,
Absolutely.
how that will impact our entire deck.
I completely agree. I think we should start with floors specifically. And talking about floors, I think the main thing that's going to affect floors, at least from my perspective in terms of a single thing we can do with the deck, is tutors and card draw.
All right, he's back on it. He's doing it again.
We've talked about this before. I talked about this at length, of course.
I didn't say anything that episode. You realize that entire episode
yeah.
was just you. I didn't do anything.
James has been dead for 84 years.
It's all in your head, Walt. It's all in your head. But yeah, we have talked about this before. If you want to check out the episode Tutors versus Card Draw,
yeah, one of the most popular, actually.
Yeah, it is one of our most popular. I think you should genuinely go listen to that if you haven't, because it will provide even better context for this section.
Definitely. Yeah. But I think, yeah, the important thing here is that tutors will single-handedly increase the floor of your deck just immensely because tutors increase the number of cards in your deck that are live draws. If you're top decking and you hit Faithful Mending, which is the draw 2, discard 2, gain 2 life, you've got a chance of finding an out in your top 2 cards, or maybe even 4 cards. But if you top deck Fabricate,
or even better, Demonic Tutor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that can literally be anything in your deck for 2 extra mana.
Exactly. But, even Fabricate, which, as we said before, was in, tier 2?
I think it was tier 2, yeah.
Tier 2. The removal. You could find removal. You could find Dispeller's Capsule. You could find Card Draw, Coveted Jewel. You could find Ramp in Sol Ring.
Yeah.
Recursion in Trading Post. You could find Protection in the One Ring. Like,
you could find creatures. If they're artifact creatures, you can find bodies. You can find
your Phyrexian Triggerform.
You can find win conditions. You can find your Brutaclad.
You could find Aetherflux Reservoir.
Yeah. You can find Bolus's Citadel.
Yeah.
Man, Fabricate gets you a lot.
Fabricate gets you so much.
in relation to, like, looking at it with WotC's tier system, right?
Yeah.
That was in bracket 2, and the things we just listed, I was like, oh no, that's actually pretty crap.
Pretty up there.
Just being, like, one of the worst shooters in our game still does a lot.
It's not even the best artifact shooter.
No.
There are better artifact shooters than that. But you see what I mean, right? Like, the number of live draws you have, like, every tutor in your deck is kind of, you can imagine it like it's glowing in your deck. Like, if you could just look at your deck and all the tutors were glowing in the dark, you could just see that a deck with 10 tutors in it, you'd be like, oh my god, the chance that I hit one of those glowing magical cards that represents another 20 is so high because of all these tutors.
I've got a simile for this.
Okay,
right? I'm not sure if you'll get it, but people that play like Battle Royale games, right?
I played Battle Royale games before.
So when you drop in, you like have to scavenge for guns, right? A tutor in your deck is the equivalent of finding a loadout drop where you have customized and built your own personal loadout, and then you can go to the loadout drop that you find hidden on a map and just equip everything in your loadout drop.
What Battle Royale games have that?
So many. Like,
really?
Warzone had it. PUBG's got it, I think.
Okay.
Even Fortnite has loadouts.
Really?
I think. Oh, maybe not Fortnite. But I know Warzone definitely does. Because I've got a custom loadout in Warzone.
Cool.
And, like, when I find a loadout drop, I'm like, top 10 time,
You're
baby.
Set. Yeah.
I can get to the top 10 now because I have my gun. I've got my power-ups. I've got my, specific attachments, all this kind of stuff.
Whereas, like, the rest of the loot is probably card draw in this instance, right? Like, hitting a card draw spell is still really good. Yeah. If you're looting and you find a gun, you're like, cool, I've got a gun. Yeah, I didn't have a gun before.
That's great. I've now can have the capacity to shoot people.
My enemies, But the loadout is, like, a lot more than a gun. It's everything else you need.
And it's the thing you've practiced with. And the thing you know as well. And it's the thing, not only the thing you practice to know, but it is the thing you need. And that's the thing about tutors, right? We just said all of the different things that we can get. We can get removal. We can get protection.
Yeah.
In a commander game, if you are at a turn 6, turn 7, and there is going to be something you need at that point, whether it's a win condition or a protection piece or removal. Yeah. There is going to be something you need in that moment, and tutors just make every card draw a more high chance of getting that. Of what you need.
Absolutely. And there's a reason why that those tutors were separated the way that they were in the bracket system, and it's because some of them represent literally anything.
Yeah, Demonic Tutor is anything in your deck for 2 mana.
Yeah.
If you need that Wrath of God and you draw Demonic Tutor, congrats, you've now got a 6 mana Wrath of God.
Yeah. You can think of these tutors as, like, not only are they representing often the best card you could draw off the top because they effectively draw any other card that you want them to. They also, like, every tutor you add is kind of removing the bad draw you could have hit off the top.
Yeah, it's removing the variance.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's removing it's raising the floor.
Yeah.
It
raises the floor of the entire deck. Like, tutors themselves have obviously very high ceilings, often very high floors as well. But just the number of tutors you have in a deck has a very strong relationship with the power level of your deck as a result.
How we've not made a raise the roof party joke yet, I'm shocked.
True. I would say if you are looking to down power as a result, like if the floor is getting too high in a deck.
If you're becoming the arch enemy in every game.
I think that one thing you can do, tutors can be downpowered by giving them lower ceiling targets.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you have a mystical tutor in your deck, fetching a Cyclonic Rift, that's a very, very strong scenario.
That's pretty good.
Mystical tutor just for Wrath of God has already just reduced the power of that tutor as a result.
That's true. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Wait, can you do that? Mystical Tutor only fetches instants.
Yeah, no, you would have to get another instant speed board wipe.
Yeah. What's another? Oh my God.
You could. Is Perplexing Test instant?
Yes.
That's a good one.
Sure. That's a lot. Actually, that's a really good
There
one.
you go, Perplexing
Because that's got a
Test.
very high ceiling and a very low floor.
Yeah.
Because there are times where Perplexing Test sucks.
Yeah,
it's
and
awful.
it's always
it hurts
yeah.
you so much.
But sometimes it's like the key to unlocking a game win.
I like that. Actually, yeah. Mystical Tutor for Cyclonic Rift is like one scenario, and then you can downpower the power of your deck by not having Cyclonic Rift and having your Perplexing Test. Even though you've got the same tutor, you've reduced the power of that tutor because you've reduced the ceiling of that tutor.
I think the other thing is you can make the tutors work harder by giving them conditions. Like, like for example, Fabricate is the tutor that we talked about for artifacts.
Yep.
But if you were to use Oswald Fiddlebender, that makes your artifact tutor have even more restrictions.
Yeah.
Now, because Oswald is like birthing pod for artifacts.
Yes. Sack a 2-drop, get a 3-drop.
It comes to the battlefield, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But and that might even influence the rest of your deck building as well. Like, then now you have to build an Oswald kind of deck.
Your
Gandalf deck is an Oswald deck. But now, like, this is what I'm saying. You now can't, like, if you top deck Oswald, awesome, you've got a tutor, but now you can't get everything in your deck.
No.
You can only get what you have on the battlefield plus 1 mana value.
Yeah.
It just makes it a little bit less. It lowers the floor.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
And interestingly, I actually think Oswald has a higher ceiling than Fabricate too, right? Because you can do it multiple times.
And it can go to the battlefield.
Yeah.
That makes it more powerful.
Yeah, there's a world where you can like hit incrementally higher targets with Oswald. I've done it before. It feels really, really great. But yeah, it's not... If you draw Oswald off the top, I mean, it has summoning sickness as well, right?
That's true. It is. Yeah, and if you draw Fabricate off the top, you can cast it then.
Yeah, you can go get the thing, cast it right now. Oswald is like, okay, next turn, I can find a 4-drop.
But the thing I really wanted was the 5-drop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing you can consider with tutors is you can just cut them and replace them with card draw.
Go to episode 39 of this podcast.
Tutors versus card draw. I still play very few tutors in my decks as a result of the things that I discovered making episode 39. So yeah, you can just in general have a deck with a lower floor by drawing cards rather than tutoring stuff.
But I will say there's nothing wrong with tutors.
No.
There's we hark on about them a lot and the power of them, but some decks need tutors, some decks are right for tutors, and tutors can be the reason why a game of Commander was fun.
Absolutely.
Like someone's getting really far in the lead, fantastic, I drew a tutor, I can get the card that stops that person in the lead from just winning too quickly.
They can also, because of this relationship they have with a deck's floor, like you can, obviously we just recommended some ways you can reduce your tutors. You can add tutors for a deck that's floor is just too low. Like,
to increase it.
I've spoken before about admittedly right now it's a Merrin deck, but my secret commander is Gerard, right?
Yeah.
And I have a lot of tutors in that deck because I need Gerard before the deck does much of anything.
Yep.
And so if I was to, like, the floor of that deck is really low. It's like I've got this 11-10 where if I attack or block with it, I have to sacrifice another creature.
And it doesn't have trample.
No, it has no keywords whatsoever.
Only downside.
That's the floor of that deck.
Yeah.
And so I needed more of those live draws, kind of more copies of Gerard, really, like cards that would get Gerard onto the battlefield, onto my hand. And so, yeah, like you can really influence the floor of your deck. And so if the floor needs to be higher for you to keep up with a very consistent play group where everyone's decks always perform really well, add some tutors. And then likewise, if you're finding your deck always, even on a bad game, is absolutely murking your opponents, that floor is probably too high.
That's kind of where I'm at with like my Scarab God deck, for example, just because I realized what the ceiling of that deck was when I did the Entomb and Reanimate thing.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, wow, this deck has an incredibly high ceiling and even on a bad day has a pretty decent floor
because of the tutors.
Because of the tutors. Like I've got a lot of live draws and I can do a lot with the graveyard. So I don't know, maybe it's something to visit.
We've got lots to talk about, including the ceiling of your deck and a little power bracket system of our own. But before that, I reckon it might be time for a thrifty interlude.
A thrifty interlude. This is the armchair in relation to ceilings and floors. It's in the middle. No, this is the kitchen countertop. Exactly in the middle. Exactly in the middle. It's like chest height. It's right in the middle between the ceiling and the floor.
Is it right in the middle? That would be a very high countertop, right?
Yeah, maybe a bar. A bar is like chest height, depending on how high the ceiling is in the bar.
I think any furniture at exactly middle height would be a problem.
Anything that's above the ground and below the ceiling, that's
Look,
what this
we're
is.
between the ceiling and the floor.
That's my point.
I acknowledge that. I
tried really hard on that one.
You did really well. That was, again, he does them on the fly, so whatever he creates is impressive.
Thank you.
We're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. As is tradition, I will be performing. This week, the card is brought to life in monologue form from the perspective of someone seeing the card.
So they're not even in the card for this one.
Do you
It's someone... Is it the perspective of the card?
You'll see.
Like POV?
You'll see.
Is this one going to get turned into a TikTok and the thing's just going to have POV? You are looking at the card.
Yeah. Maybe.
Speaking of which.
Let's read the card we're featuring this week.
It is Fleeting Reflection. For 1 and a blue, you get an instant that says target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Untap that creature. Until end of turn, it becomes a copy of up to 1 other target creature.
Damn, I look good. Can you believe I just woke up? No bags under my eyes, hair, perfect. I don't even look pale or puffy. And that's just my face. I've been hitting the weights for maybe 10 years now. It shows. You can probably see it through my t-shirt, can't you? That's all right. Don't be shy. It's not a secret. Look, you could probably work out, get a good haircut, bit of spray tan, hell, even use some makeup, and you still wouldn't look this good. Yeah, maybe it's the clothes. That helps for sure. But mostly, it's style. You can't buy that. And I got it in spades. You know what? I don't even want to go out. Ain't that wild? I got everything I need in front of this here mirror. You run along to that there party, you tell him I said hi, but I'm going to stay right here. Send him love. From Narcissus. Get budgeted.
From Narcissus?
Yeah.
Okay, I get
That's
it.
the
Reflections.
reflection,
I'm with you. Hey, this is a very on-topic card to assess ceilings and floors for.
It's true. It's a card that I think has I think the floor is fine.
The floor is...
honestly.
Giving a creature hexproof is what I would see as the floor of this card.
And for 2 mana, it's slightly overcosted. There are 1-drops that do that, but it's not
Shijiri's
bad.
Shelter we run and we like.
That's basically the same card.
Yep.
But the really big one is if you've got a commander or a card in your deck that's really important to untap, it's 2 mana hexproof, untap that creature. That's really the floor in my mind of this card. And then the ceiling is this, until end of turn it becomes a copy of up to 1 other target creature.
There's things you can do with that.
There's things you can do in the right circumstance.
I don't know what, but it's busted, whatever
the idea of what
is.
They are, yeah. Thrifty Thursdays happens every week in our Discord server. You can check out the dedicated channel, play a few games, or get some advice in your latest brew.
Yeah, I love hanging out there. I've created a couple of new threads in our Discord server just recently of different topic discussions.
They've been fun.
Yeah, good little conversations going on. But we've been at the floor.
We have.
We've
looked
decks.
At card floors and ceilings. We've looked at deck floors. I think we should talk about deck ceilings.
Let's raise the roof. See, I told you I'd get it in.
Snuck it in. It was really subtle too.
Subtle as a cannon.
I think the ceiling of a deck can be sort of defined by the very best that our deck can do.
Yeah, it's the Entomb Reanimate example.
Exactly.
If your deck is capable of doing something that busted, that is the best it can do. You know? Winning on turn 3, if your deck is capable of doing that, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we can sort of break it down into a few things that I think there are a few specific things that really drag the ceiling of a deck very high.
That raise the roof.
Yeah, basically.
We're going to refer to it like that from now on.
Sure.
We raise the floor, but we're raising the roof.
We're raising the roof. The roof. I think the first one I want to highlight is free spells.
Oh, yeah, good one.
Spells that let you answer things without paying anything, really. It just massively increases your potential to remain in the lead, to get into the lead and then stay there.
Yeah, especially when you look at protection spells, in my mind, these are the spells that are if you put... This is if you had the option in poker to go all in, but keep 1 chip Like, just in case it goes wrong.
I think it's more than keeping one chip. I think it's like going all in, but you've got like a scoop set up where like if you lose the hand at the last minute, you can swoop the chips out of the way.
Yeah, you can just pull them all back.
Yeah.
Because like, if you think about cards like Flawless Maneuver.
Oh, yeah.
Is the free, or everything gains hexproof and indestructible.
Yep. If you control a commander, it's for free.
Yeah, it's part of the free commander cycle spells.
I would throw Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship into this same camp of
same group.
I've tapped out. I've got this really important thing here.
Might be my commander.
It might be a board full of tokens.
Yep.
Like, regardless, one of these will. I mean, Deflecting Swat's more like a target, but Fierce Guardianship, Flawless Maneuver for sure. Like, is the I've made 100 tokens. I'm quote tapped out.
Yeah, but
someone goes to board wipe. I can Fierce Guardianship.
And then, if anything, you think about the ceiling raising that does, because let's say someone goes, all right, Blasphemous Act, and you go Flawless Maneuver.
Yeah,
you have now not only saved yourself from a board wipe, but you have kept your board and your opponents lost theirs.
Absolutely.
Like, that has absolutely accelerated you in the lead.
Yeah.
And like, even, cards like Clever Concealment, you're really hot on, for example.
Well, yeah. I'm hot on calling it out for being really powerful for sure. But yeah, this is the one with Convoke. And any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. It's for 3 and a white.
Yeah.
So as long as you have a white creature, this is basically free.
It's basically free.
4 creatures, one of them is white. Very easy to do in a token build. Phase out. Again, same thing. Someone Blasphemous Acts, you phase out your entire board.
Yeah.
It's better than them than countering it because they still board wiped everything else.
And it's like almost better than giving them indestructible as well, because then, you pass the opponent passes the turn to the next one, they could be board wiping as well.
Yeah,
so it could just be safe. But like I'm saying, like, Clever Concealment versus Flawless Maneuver, like one is slightly better in my opinion. But like I'm even saying like better, like just the access to a free protection spell really drastically raises the ceiling.
And we're seeing more and more of them. I mean, the flares cycle, I would put, in terms of protection spells, I would put blue, white, and red here. Red copies, it's like copies a spell, right?
It's 4,
I think. Yeah. So that one's less good for protecting specifically, but the white one does hexproof indestructible, I believe, and your life total can't change, something crazy like that.
It's correct.
And the blue flare is a counter spell, if I'm not mistaken.
For a non-creature spell.
Non-creature. So it's like Fierce Guardianship.
Yeah, but I think that the fact that there are becoming more spells that are free is something that we as Commander players need to keep our eye on and just be aware. Like, if you want to get powerful decks and want to, you're playing CDH, great, you've got more toys, enjoy them. But if you are trying to stay in like a certain power range, these spells are the spells that push a ceiling higher and higher and higher.
Absolutely.
Because of the effect they have. Like it just allows you to go all in on a turn. If you can back up your all in play, that makes your all in play better. Like just better.
I mean, I used to play what I would argue is the worst of the Ikoria free spells, which is Obscuring Haze.
That's the fog.
It's
damage.
the one-sided fog. If you control your commander, you can cast it for free. Yeah. It's usually 2 and a green. I used to play that in my Mowu deck, and I had to cut it. Is it
not in there anymore?
I cut it because I just thought, like, even that one, which I think is probably the worst of all 5 of those spells.
It's 100, but Deadly Rollick is like the second worst, and that's
still really, really good. But the Obscuring Haze still, I felt like it was just kind of, it felt like cheating, where it was like I could tap out, do this absolutely insane play, eliminate a player, and then I passed the turn. And it was like it sort of felt like I was untouchable
and have no ramifications for your swing.
The ceiling of that was so high, and it sort of didn't feel like what green is about. Like, I almost feel like it suits blue and stuff better to cheat these costs, and whereas green, because the mono green deck. Anyway, getting into other stuff now, but the worst of those free spells, like, was still powerful enough that I was like, I don't think this sits at the right power level that the rest of this deck is doing, because it drags the ceiling so high. When I would draw 15 cards with my Garrick's Return of the Wild Speaker or something like that, the likelihood that I hit that and then just feel untouchable for the rest of the game was so high.
You're never discarding a free spell, are you?
Never.
Like when you go to clean up, if you have if you're fully tapped out but you have 9 cards in hand, one of them's a free spell, that is automatically I'm keeping that because I can use it.
And again, Obscuring Haze is the worst of them.
This is the floor of that cycle is Obscuring Haze, and the ceiling of Obscuring Haze is still pretty high.
It's a very tall room. That one. That room starts very high in the ceiling and goes even higher.
It's a ballroom, big space.
It's that ballroom above Flinders Street Station.
Oh
They're reopening sometime soon.
I also think free removal is something that pushes the envelope or raises the roof even more. Like, we've got really good free removal.
You mentioned Deadly Rollick already.
That's a great one.
Really
Solitude.
This is the exile a white card, exile something.
Flare of Malice is the new black one. Sacrifice creature.
It's not targeted removal, but it makes everyone. It sort of does an impression of that other card I really like. What's the Soul Shatter?
Soul Shatter, from
Zendikar Rising. It's a similar effect, I believe.
I think it's just sacrifice a non-token creature. I can't remember exactly.
It might not be the greatest power. I can't recall how it's worded.
The point is the fact that it's free removal. And again, we're seeing more and more of these being printed. And I think, again, it's that effect of, you can go all in on progressing your board state, and you still get to remove things on your opponent's board. There is no trade-off.
No.
Commander is about balancing resources. Yeah. I've said it a million times. Magic is a resource management game.
Yeah.
Your life total is a resource. Mana is a resource. Your strategy is a resource.
Yeah.
If you go all in on your strategy, then you have to make sacrifices. You now don't have the mana to cast murder and, go for the throat.
There's sort of supposed to be, in my opinion, times in the Commander game where if you do make 100 tokens, you do need to tap out.
Yes.
Sometimes you should need to have to go for it and to go, God, I hope no one board wipes right now. And these spells often just trivialize that aspect of the game and go oh, no, you can go all in and also be safe.
And be safe and remove your opponents. You can go all in and then your opponent goes all in and they're tapped out.
Yeah.
But because you've got the free removal spell.
You Flare of Malice and they sack their commander and it's oh, GG.
Yeah, cool. Now you went all in, I went all in, but I had the extra free removal.
The ceiling just goes up so high.
Yeah.
Where do we play free spells, spells that are free removal, I'm counting removal and protection. I'm not talking about Sprout Swarm, which I play. Free removal, free protection. I personally only play them in my strongest decks, and specifically, I think I only have in my Azor the Lawbringer deck, I have Solitude, and then I do admittedly in Arami, which is not as high powered of a deck, I do play Pylon, which is
that's a Convoke removal
Convoke,
spell.
destroy a creature, Surveil 2.
Yeah.
It's just mostly because it's so good in that deck.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
As a one-off, maybe it's not too bad. But those are the only two that I think I play in all of my decks. Are you similar?
I used to run Force of Negation in Yuriko.
Sure.
But Yuriko doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
Because the power level was too high. The ceiling of that deck was way too high. And I think, having spells we were talking about tutors before. I had a vampiric tutor in that deck. I had 4. Sure. So now I've got free spells. So I can really see why, on reflection, that deck ceiling was pushed. I don't think any of my casual decks have free spells. There's probably a couple of Convoke spells, but not removal, not protection.
Do you still play Flawless Maneuver in your Savine deck?
Savine has Flawless Maneuver.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, that's probably
the only one.
Yeah.
I can't think of any of your other decks.
I don't think... Deadly Rollick is in Ukima.
Oh, sure.
But I give that a pass because it was from the same precon.
Sure. It's their fault.
Yeah,
it's Wizards' fault.
They gave me the cards in the same precon.
That's true.
I'm running this.
It's the Otrimi, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the other. Those are the other face commanders. Yeah. That's funny.
It's not my fault. Blame the designer of Ikoria.
Again, the tiers are your fault, and the free removal is your fault, and Deadly Rollick is your fault.
And we're fixing it all.
Yeah. Everything.
Get commanded.
Everything.
This tiny podcast from Australia.
90 minutes.
Us.
That's all we needed, actually. The next way I think that you can really drag the ceiling of a deck super high is effects that let you cheat costs.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to free spells, but these are things that sort of allow you to rocket ahead of opponents who are casting spells the, quote, fair way.
And I think we're not going to include mana reducers in this. Your enthusiastic mechanaut that makes artifacts cost 1 less.
No.
That's not cheating a cost. You paid for a thing that made your spells cost 1 less.
Yeah, this is really like ways of suddenly having way more mana or casting a spell that costs way more mana than you should have right now.
Bolas's Citadel comes to mind
Absolutely.
immediately.
Cast spells from top of your library by paying life instead of mana.
Yep.
Yeah, the amount of spells you can get by using your life with Bolas's Citadel.
How much life
crazy.
have you got? Yeah, that's the ceiling of
the
that
limit.
card. How much life you got?
And if there's a land on top.
True.
Always the limit.
The king of cheating mana costs, Omniscience.
Yep. Even
Yep.
I've got Breach the Multiverse written here. I suppose that also does it too.
Oh, that cheats mana because
you're cheating out the creatures that you
and
do.
you're also paying like X amount of mana for 3 creatures. That cheats mana costs.
I think I was thinking of one with the multiverse.
One with the multiverse is Omniscience Light.
Yeah.
That's where your brain was at. Okay.
Definitely. But even stuff like, they recently printed a new version of this Cryptolith Rite and now Enduring Vitality.
Oh, yeah. The creature that dies comes back as an enchantment.
Yeah, but makes all your creatures tap for a mana of any color.
Cracked.
Stuff like that can do it. Even like you play Inspiring Statuary.
Oh, yeah. Non-artifact creatures or non-artifact spells have improvise.
Yep. So you've got like in your Sally Sparrow deck, you tap all your clues for colorless mana effectively.
So good.
Yeah.
Like it allows, like, I can go Inspiring Statuary and then on like the following turn, on like turn 4, I'm able to cast something like, or maybe not on turn 4, maybe turn 5, I'll be able to cast like Astral Dragon for tap 2 islands and then tap 6 clues.
Yeah.
Astral Dragon.
Cast
Like that
an
is
8 mana spell for 2 mana.
That is an incredible cheat on my mana costs. Yeah, 100%.
Totally. These spells, just by virtue of being in your deck, can just drag the ceiling higher because the potential is as good as the spell that you're cheating out, right? So casting Astral Dragon, like the ceiling of your deck is now Astral Dragon costs 2 mana. Yeah, that is a huge ceiling.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I think we're a little bit more happy to play these in our decks than free removal, free protection.
Yeah,
these things we look at as more of like a. I think there are like certain, like Bolas's Citadel for me is like that card's ceiling and floors are very high.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Sure.
Whereas Inspiring Statuary, the floor is pretty low. Like if I don't have a lot of clues,
it can be Panharmonicon, right?
It can be the Panharmonicon thing.
This does nothing at all.
It does nothing at all. So I think like there is a scale of cheating costs that we are happy with playing.
Sure.
I think, Omniscience and Bolas's Citadel definitely sit at that top end.
Yeah.
Mana reducers and all that kind of stuff right at the other end.
One with the multiverse, for instance, I think is a really, really strong card. But for 8 mana, I think it's on par with most other 8 mana things you can do in Commander.
If anything, it might be.
It might be slightly overcosted, really.
You know what makes that better?
What?
Vampiric Shooter.
The real villain of the podcast.
This whole podcast has just been fuck Vampiric Shooter.
Yeah, you out there. I know you. Get out of here.
Get out of here.
We play a lot more of these cards for sure.
Yeah.
I think the single biggest contributor towards a deck's ceiling is the win cons you choose for your deck.
That is the definition of like CEDH, right? Like when you look at like the top of our format, it is running the most efficient like win conditions you can possibly find. Like right now, the cheapest way to win is Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation.
Yep, it costs you 3 mana.
3 mana, 2 blue, 1 black. If you have that available and those 2 cards in hand, you win.
Yep.
And like there are ways on turn 1, on turn 0, theoretically, you could win with Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation.
Yeah.
If you have, Leyline of Anticipation, a couple of fast mana rocks, and those 2 cards.
Yeah, it's conceivable.
GG. But versus you make a board of tokens over 7 turns.
Yep,
and then cast Overrun. They are 2 very different win cons.
Totally. I mean, even when we're talking about Overrun effects, I think that you can have cards with much higher ceilings in this category. I mean, obviously, like Craterhoof Behemoth is probably about as high as the ceiling gets for this kind of thing.
Overrun is like probably the lowest of those.
I think I would put Overrun as the lowest ceiling. I would say that in Overrun's favor, it's got a very low floor. It always gives all your creatures +3/+3 and trample, where Craterhoof Behemoth can be nothing. It's very easy to make Craterhoof Behemoth a lot better, which is why
more busted,
that ceiling goes way higher. But even like, for instance, Overwhelming Encounter.
This is in your Tilda and Lear deck, right?
Yeah, has a slightly higher ceiling, but the maximum amount of buff you can get is 4. So I would put this as like the ceiling I think is higher than Overrun. This is the one where you roll a d20, by the way. The low rolls, it just gives you creatures +2/+2 vigilance and trample. At a slightly higher roll, 2/+1 counters vigilance and trample, and then at the really high roll, +4/+4, 4 counters, and vigilance and trample.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, the ceiling is higher than Overrun. Absolutely.
I mean, you can actually see quite easily the ceiling and floor of that card.
Absolutely. It's written on the card.
The ceiling is rolling a natural 20 and the floor is rolling 1 to 9.
100%. But I would say that the ceiling of this like sits somewhere between Craterhoof and Overrun, I think. Or it's higher than Overrun, lower than Craterhoof.
I think that there's a bunch of cards in this category, right? There's like, the Blossoming Bog Beast, the one that cares about
life gain. It's like when you go to combat,
you gain 2 life.
And then for every life you gain this turn, creatures get +X/+X and trample.
And trample is the key. Yeah. I think is it 5 mana?
I think it's a 5 mana creature.
Mana.
Yeah.
Like that is pretty. Like at its floor, it gains you 2 life, so everything gets +2/+2 and trample.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
But
on a body too.
If you like Beacon of Immortality.
Yeah.
And then go to combat. Like that's +40/+40.
Gain
that's
10
great.
life. Gain 10 life. And
that's pretty insane. That's a game-ending spell. But like, yeah, that has a maybe lower floor but higher ceiling.
Yes.
But you can see that there's like a spectrum of these effects, right? There's cards with like very low floors and even lower ceilings, and they sit at the lower end of the spectrum.
Sure.
And the very high floors and high ceiling cards,
like Craterhoof,
Craterhoof Behemoth.
Yeah,
these are the reasons why these cards are more powerful.
Yeah, and I think that the ceiling of your deck, it makes sense, is capped by this win condition, right?
Yeah.
Like the best your deck can do is usually finishing the game.
Yeah,
and so if your deck
or winning the game,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if your deck has the ability to win the game in a way that's very consistent, or just but in an explosive way, like Craterhoof Behemoth, right? Like you only really need to have 7 or 8 creatures. If life totals are low enough, you can just cast Craterhoof.
6 creatures. And a Craterhoof.
Cast Craterhoof Behemoth. You're usually killing at least a player or 2 that turn. The ceiling of that deck is just naturally higher than an Overrun deck, I think. Similarly, Aristocrats, for instance.
Sure.
Command the Dread Horde gets played a lot in this category. I really like it.
Yep.
But it does have a lower ceiling than Rise of the Dark Realms.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the card Command the Dread Horde limits you on how many creatures you can get.
Yep. You pay life for the total mana value of the stuff you choose from graveyards. Yep.
But Command the Dread Horde is just everything.
Rise of the Dark Realms.
Rise of the Dark Realms. Sorry, the other one.
Yep.
It's
every
just
card,
everything.
Every graveyard.
That's it's a little bit more mana, but like it is absolutely and the other thing is the floor of that card is a lot higher, right? Like if you are always grabbing everything, you are always grabbing everything.
That's
whereas
true.
Command the Dread Horde is...
That's interesting. I think there's sort of 2 floors there though, because equally Rise of the Dark Realms' floor is that it's 9 mana. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
like
true.
The floor of that spell is paying 9, whereas the floor of Command the Dread Horde is pay 6. I don't know.
There's some
They're very
arguments
different
to be made
sorts of
there.
cards. But yeah,
I think
ceiling,
personal bias comes into this a little bit. What you prefer.
Yeah, whether you prefer mana efficiency, and that will come into it. But yeah, the ceiling of a Rise of the Dark Realms deck will just be higher because, you can be on 1 life and top deck Rise of the Dark Realms and maybe win the game that turn that you probably can't do with Command the Dread Horde.
Yeah. I mean, in an Aristocrat strategy, there are like sacrifice outlets, right?
Oh, totally.
This is something that I'm thinking about because like if you have a free sacrifice outlet in your deck, that is a lot higher of a ceiling than a sacrifice outlet that you're required to pay mana for.
Oh, especially if the free sac outlet gains you mana.
Oh, Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar. Yeah, or even like Altar of Dementia, milling you more cards to reanimate later.
The sac outlet gives you, totally.
Yeah. The benefit of the sac outlet, but even just take the benefit of the sac outlet away. Just look at it on a free sac outlet versus non-free sac outlet.
Totally.
The ceiling of having a free sac outlet is using all of your mana to generate a board to sack.
Yeah.
The absolute ceiling of that is generating a ton of creatures, sacking them all and winning the game, right?
Yeah.
With the paid sacrifice outlet, let's say it's pay 1 black, sack a creature, do a thing.
Yeah.
You are limited. You are capped by how much mana you have available.
Totally.
So that is the ceiling, right? You can only sacrifice 10 creatures if you only have 10 mana to pay into it.
I mean, we can come straight back to Rise of the Dark Realms here, right? And go...
You're limited by your life.
Yeah. But also, if you pay 9 mana and you get every creature out of every bin... If you have a sack outlet that's one of those creatures like a Viserys here and an aristocrat effect, that will probably let you win the game on the spot. But if the sack outlet you get back from Rise of the Dark Realms from your graveyard is pay a black, do whatever, you paid 9 mana for Rise of the Dark Realms, you probably can't win the game that turn.
No.
You might have to wait a full turn cycle before you can get there.
This is an interesting way of looking at like specific archetypes of decks.
Yeah, and what's the ceiling? I mean, even with aristocrats, like Macaeus and Gravecrawler. Like,
Oh, yeah.
those
like,
cards, as soon as you see that card in
Yeah.
a deck, like even without infinites being on the table, just the ceiling of those cards, the fact that they could
Yep.
go infinite in certain instances, maybe you Rise of the Dark Realms and steal someone's creature
Yeah.
that goes infinite with Macaeus.
Yeah, Yorgmoth, Thran Physician.
Yes.
Like, that's another card that you sneeze and oops, I went infinite. Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah.
And yeah, Macaeus, 100% is another card of like, whoops, I could go infinite here.
Yeah.
Even if you're not running the infinites.
Totally.
Just by playing a game of Commander where there are 3 other players.
Yeah.
You could.
You could. And
you could.
Even just giving the creatures Undying, like even in that instance
That is
where
just a strong ability.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah.
a full-on strong ability.
even in that instance where you're just trying to sack the whole board to drain everyone with aristocrats.
Now you do it twice.
You sack everything twice.
Yep. And
Not
now
being
you're
non-human.
Yeah, now Yorgmoth, if you're sacking it to Yorgmoth, you're doing
Yeah.
You're drawing cards as well.
Yeah, and killing your opponent's
yeah,
stuff.
Like
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah, the ceiling of those cards is just so high. I mean, look, even if you're talking about the possibility that your deck makes infinite mana, the ceiling of infinite mana is kind of limited by what you can spend that infinite mana on.
Yeah, I guess.
So, like, yes, there is
Yeah.
Torment of Hellfire exists.
Yep, that wins you the game.
Reiterate exists. With any burn spell, you make infinite copies of a spell, you win.
Yeah, Thrasios being a commander, you
Yep.
win.
Draw
Yep.
the deck.
Yep.
Absolutely. But then, like, at a lower ceiling, you could be a Helix Pinnacle deck.
Oh, so you win on your next
Yeah,
turn.
you've got a full upkeep, a full turn cycle where people can try and kill you before you maybe win in your upkeep.
Yeah, okay.
like the ceiling of I've got infinite mana.
Yeah.
If your outlet is Helix Pinnacle versus Torment of Hellfire, Torment of
that's
Hellfire
win
says
now
I win
versus
right now
win
versus I
next
maybe
turn.
win later.
I'll tell you what you could do with infinite mana, Walt.
Sure.
You could cast Sprout Swarm infinite times. And that's not win this turn, that's win next turn. So it's like a lower ceiling.
I'll go you one better. If you're making suggestions, that Sprout
Go on.
Swarm's great for me.
I would love to see you go infinite on Sprout Swarm.
I've got one for you. This feels like what you would do.
Sure.
The card Soothsaying.
Oh yeah, pay X, rearrange your library.
Doomsday. You just cast
Oh,
Doomsday.
built your up, and I don't need to exile the cards. I just build my own library.
I've decided that my next 3 draws will be the best 3 cards in my deck.
I literally stack the deck.
Yep.
I love infinite mana into
Infinite mana
Soothsaying.
Soothsaying is just like, oh boy, if I draw some cards, guys, you're gonna be sorry.
Yeah.
You're gonna be sorry.
My deck is exactly how I need it. You cast a spell that affects the
Yeah.
game. Oh, I need
God
to
damn
rearrange
it.
my deck. Let me pump infinite mana back into Soothsaying.
I mean, look, yeah, like even though like Soothsaying is kind of a silly, funny thing, if your deck contained Azure Mage, this is has an ability, pay 3 and a blue, draw a card.
Oh, you could effectively like
You do just win.
You
then,
do just
right?
win immediately,
You just
yeah.
draw your whole deck, do whatever
Yeah.
you want. I mean, yeah, you could have a lab man. Like,
Oh yeah.
the ceilings here vary so much, and we're talking about infinite mana,
And
right?
it's in the context of like the same combo, infinite mana, in different decks means vastly different things.
Absolutely.
Like if you are spending infinite mana on a win right now thing, the ceiling of your deck is higher than a I win next turn if I generate
Yeah.
infinite mana.
Yeah, or maybe your infinite mana is, Sprout Swarms, and it's like, if I can attack you,
Yeah.
and I get to my next turn,
And I might cast Deadly Tempest to make
Yeah,
you lose life equal to
exactly.
the number of sprouts.
Yeah, Rakdos Charm.
Yeah. Oh, that would be.
That would feel good.
Love
That card always
Rakdos
feels
Charm.
good.
All right, we have talked extensively about the ceilings and floors of cards
We have.
individually. We've talked about the decks, both floor-wise and ceiling-wise.
Yes.
What raises floors, what
Yes.
raises ceilings. Shall we now tackle the
Power
real
brackets.
issue? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we should. I think this is what the Space Commanders were getting at.
Because
we need
we-
to factor in ceilings and
Yeah.
floors when we define power levels. So let's talk power level.
Let's do it. Are we going to do our own bracket system?
I think we should do our own bracket system.
4 brackets.
4 brackets.
Sure.
I'm not okay. This is for fun.
Yeah.
This is not a replacement for our Rule Zero guide, which we still recommend.
Yes.
Much better than whatever we're about to do here.
Yeah, having an actual conversation and not just slapping a number onto your
Yes.
deck is a better Rule Zero pre-game discussion than my deck's a 7 or
Yeah.
my deck's a bracket 3.
Totally.
But because we know better than Wizards of the Coast, we're making our own. That is also a lie. To be
Yes.
full transparency, Wizards of the Coast, you go for it, girl.
Yeah.
Like, you make your power bracket
Yeah.
thing. We're going to do it ourselves, though.
But I think there's some merit in this system. So the way that we're going to break it down, we'll go through tier by tier.
Yep.
Tier 1, bracket 1.
So this is like the equivalent to their bracket 1, which is the
Yep.
lower end of the bracket scale.
This was their Swords to Plowshares, their Grave
Grave
Titan.
Titan. Yeah.
Our bracket 1 is low floor, low ceiling.
So my deck does bad thing, but if it does it really well, it does slightly better bad thing.
Yes, exactly. My deck might do nothing, but sometimes it does a bad thing.
Yeah,
This is definitely like pre-con Magic. This is battle cruiser magic.
That's shitting on precons too hard.
With where precons are at these
Yeah.
days, maybe this is below precon.
Yeah. But this
it's
is like
there.
super battle cruisery. This is
Totally.
like I threw this together with the cards in my collection. I don't buy boxes. This is just what I had available to me. There's a bit of synergy, but
Yeah.
it's like my elemental deck that I just built. It's exactly like that.
That's interesting because I think that fits into the next category.
Oh,
But
interesting.
We
Okay.
should go into that. But yes, I think these decks are pretty easy to define within this bracket. These are decks that, you know,
These are bad decks.
well, they don't do nothing, you
Yeah.
know. But maybe
They
it
function.
should be. Yeah, relatively the ceiling is low.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the ceiling is nothing, but this like compared to
They can still win a game.
they can still win a game. They're not going infinite.
Yeah.
They're not, you know, having like 5 extra combats. You know, the things they're doing are going to feel fair and reasonable. They're probably going to be doing overrun sorts of things.
Yeah, and
It'll
if
take
they're
them 10
doing an
turns.
overrun sort of thing, they're probably running overrun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Or
mana,
maybe Rally of the Peasants.
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
like in even worse effects than overrun.
and they're doing it like on time. You know, they're
Yeah.
not cheating mana costs really necessarily.
They're definitely not tutoring.
No, and it's probably going to take them 8 or 9 turns minimum. Maybe
Yeah.
more like 10 or
If
11.
anything, that's their absolute ceiling is
Yeah,
winning on
it could
turn
be.
9. Like
That's probably the
that's
ceiling.
them going, yeah, my deck did the thing.
Exactly. I think players who like really long games will enjoy being there, obviously, because I think the games are going to go long.
So not us.
Probably not us.
But tier 2.
Tier 2. I reckon this is where I like to be.
Yeah.
This is low floor, high ceiling.
Yeah. So this is, if anything, the most varied a deck could potentially be within our system.
I would say
this is
so.
the highest amount of variance
Yes.
you'll experience.
Yes, I think likely. I think one thing I'll say about this tier, Rule 0 is going to be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, because most of the conversations you'll have is like, sometimes I'll win on turn 3.
Yes.
Other times I will do nothing.
Yeah, straight up. And so, you know, if we're imagining this bracket system as an alternative to Rule 0, you could sit in bracket 2 and, you know, someone could win on turn 5 because
Yeah.
the ceiling is high, but they also could maybe not. And the rest of the players might be like, oh, I just cast Rampant Growth. That's all I've done so far
Yeah,
because the
sure.
floor is really low.
Yeah.
I think that building from within your own collection is a really likely way to bring about this tier.
Oh, so that's why you said my new elemental deck could fit here.
I think so, because I think likely when you build from within your collection, your best cards often end up in the deck.
Yeah, I put a Rhystic Study in my elemental deck.
It also
Yeah,
has
good
a
point.
Mystic Grimoire, if I'm not mistaken.
It does,
It's
yeah.
less good in a casual game,
Yeah.
of course. But yeah, but also some of your worst cards are likely to end up in a deck that you build from your entire collection. 'cause
Yeah, I've got
you
a 3 mana 4/1.
Yep. Ball Elemental
That's
is
it.
in James's
Yeah,
Elemental
Ball
deck.
Lightning is in
Ball
there.
Lightning,
red,
that's
red,
right.
red for a 6/1 with Trample Haste and
Yeah.
sack it at your end step. Real powerful commander, people.
Oh, yeah.
But the ceiling of that deck is that I get Risen Reef down and
Totally.
I'm putting lands onto the battlefield, drawing a million cards,
I mean,
making
even-
elementals.
Even just Rhystic Study, right? That
Yeah.
as a ceiling is very high.
Yeah, it's got a real consistent ceiling that I can rely on. I think we have built a lot of decks in this range.
I would say so.
I think like your Vevictus deck is a fantastic example of like, well, sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit
Well,
because
it reveals at the top. It's
It's
random.
random.
Sometimes you will flip into Coveted Jewel.
and
or
you have
you'll-
only like very few ways of seeing the top of your library.
I think
Like you've got a scry land in there.
there's some Scry lands, yeah.
That's
there's the
probably good.
Surveil land in there as well, and there's also there's a goblin that says whenever you sacrifice a creature, Scry 1.
Oh, that's pretty good.
But that actually, funnily enough, with the way Vevictus's trigger works, that actually happens after Vevictus's
so
trigger because it's all
Vevictus
one line
one
of
ability,
text.
yeah.
So it's not very good.
But your Kraken Acroma deck is definitely also in this
that
category.
would be one where, like, yeah, the floor of that deck was I do absolutely nothing. The ceiling of that deck was I
You
win on turn 5 or 6.
Maybe even
sometimes.
earlier.
Yeah.
Like if you get Krak down, win all of your flips to make tokens,
Yeah.
polymorph into Mirrorwing Dragon.
Yeah.
Turn 4, turn 5, you are winning that game.
Definitely. I think, interestingly, I think I've built within this tier before, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Victor sits there, Kraken and Chroma, as you said. I think a lot of your decks fit in here.
Yeah, probably.
I feel like this is really
Yeah.
your spot. I think you really like explosive plays.
I do.
Which raises the ceiling,
Yep.
right? And then I think because you build from within your collection a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that limits the floor.
Yeah, and I also think I think I agree with you a lot on the building and what I build with
Sure.
thing and the plays, but also I really, really enjoy me the pilot, being the reason a deck performs well.
Oh,
so like
sure.
variants of a deck, like if you know, for example, told an AI, hey, play James's Phylath deck.
Sure.
The AI would play it, right?
Yeah.
But me as James, the guy that built the deck,
sure.
I know more than that AI. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I feel like me as the pilot has more of an impact on these decks than decks with very high floors, very high ceilings, because the deck plays themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it really tells you what to do.
Well, I suppose because we have a high ceiling and a low floor, the cards within this deck are probably high variance cards.
They are, yeah,
and
100%.
So, like,
and the combos are also variants as well, yeah.
But I think that high variance cards often do require a bit more thinking about, right? Like, you need to know
planning.
When is the time to take the risk with this card.
It's about knowing your opponents as well. It's about knowing the decks at the table and knowing what decks have the potential to stop you. And there's a lot more of the pilot that's required with these decks, in my opinion.
Interesting.
I think the other thing is like just to be wary. Like, yes, I do love building these decks with low floors and do nothing, but also very high ceilings. Just be wary about building these decks. If you care at all about your win and loss ratio, these decks will really hurt. Like, I've been hurt and scarred by many of my decks because they just never win or never do the thing or never push the button enough to win the game. They do it enough to show that the deck functions, but never get the win con. Yeah, like for example, the deck that I'm thinking of very specifically here is my Ninth Doctor deck. Like that deck is 100% this low floor, very high ceiling kind of deck. Like
that makes sense.
If I get a bunch of upkeep triggers with the Ninth Doctor that draw me more cards, or scry cards, or do like dinky little things like that.
Yeah,
that's great. But it's not doing anything.
Yeah,
like it's not really doing anything. But if I have like a Court of Embereth, where I'm creating creatures and dealing damage, and then I make an extravagant replication token copy of Court of Embereth every upkeep, that is explosive as fuck, and that will win the game so quickly.
It's interesting. I wonder whether I think that this tier is hard to give Rule Zero advice for.
Yes,
and I think sometimes that I maybe drag the average power level of a game that me and you are in up when you play one of these decks, because I know what it can do when it's explosive.
You know the ceiling.
I know the ceiling.
You've seen it before.
Yeah, you go, I'm going to play my Phylath deck, and in my head, I'm imagining, Azusa's out, so is Crucible of Worlds,
and Fable Passage
in the bin, because I've seen that happen.
Yeah, but like,
But the floor
is also like missing land drops.
Totally. And so anyway, it's interesting. I think you can absolutely play these decks, use them. But I feel bad. I sometimes feel like I have dragged the average power level of a deck at a table that you're playing one of these decks at higher, because I'm going, look out, guys, it's a deck that does this, when it doesn't always do that. But it's tough,
It's interesting. I think this conversation that we're having here is almost a full tangent from where we're going. And I think there's a whole episode on how to give a Rule Zero conversation within your play group that doesn't give bias, because we've had conversations about this before, that sometimes you make me arch enemy before we even start the game, and that has at times made me lose the game and not have a good time.
Sure.
And I think there is like a real effect with this category, this low floor, high ceiling category of decks, that and if you are the type of player like me that brings these decks to the tables a lot, there will be people within your play group that goes, oh god, last time I played against James's Scarab God deck, he went Entomb Reanimate on turn 2, and we were like so behind for the whole game. Yeah, cool, but like I have to have both those cards in my opening hand, and like there's lots of things. You did see it last time we played, but I promise it doesn't happen all the time. It's hard to say that my deck is not that powerful when on turn 2 I reanimated an 8-drop.
Well, and this is the tough thing, I think, and where I see where Wizards are coming from by defining brackets by the cards that are in them, because when you have cards that powerful, the potential is there. But I think this is the issue of it is, when the floor is low,
it's removing the context of the rest of the deck
by doing that. It's exactly this category, I think, gets most hit by that, where your deck, some of the cards in your deck, I mean, there's a Vampiric Tutor in that deck, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a
scheming
symmetry in
sure,
that deck.
But I suspect with a few of the cards in there that your Scarab God deck would end up in the third bracket.
It'd probably be in the third bracket,
And that's not where that deck belongs. Like, I think your deck belongs in bracket two, which is where it is. Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that I have Entomb probably puts it into the bracket 3. Yeah.
Speaking of bracket 3, though, we've got a different bracket 3. I don't think this bracket is necessarily higher than the previous one, but let's talk about that. High floor, low ceiling is the bracket here. I think this is adjacent to the other bracket we've just talked about.
They kind of sit on the same level, but I can see why we want to put this slightly above, because it's more consistently doing the thing.
It is. It's interesting. I think that these are decks that always work, or almost always work,
or at least do something.
They do the thing.
Yeah,
like pretty much every time. But they're not like gaining insurmountable leads with the advantage that they grant. Like, they're using a really cool value engine to do something very fair, would be the example I would give.
Like, right? Draw one card per every player's turn.
Yeah.
Like one extra, or like, 3 extra cards per rotation.
Yeah. Or like, a deck that I think sits within this category of yours, Sally Sparrow. Like,
that's incredibly fair.
Yeah, like, and yes, you're doing I'm flashing creatures in, I'm doing this, and this. You're making clues. Like, the thing you're doing is making artifacts that you pay 2 mana to draw a card.
Yes.
It's very fair, but it looks like a lot of things are happening because it's a really consistent deck. It's flashing creatures in, it's bouncing them back to hand, it's making lots of game actions, but the ceiling of the deck is Tangle Trove Kelp.
Yeah, that's me winning the game, is Tangle Trove Kelp. In the exact same vein, your Catilda and Lear deck is 100% in this category because it always casts humans and always flashes back spells. But the humans you're casting and the spells you're flashing back is like, 2-drop human that is a 2/2 and can sacrifice to blow up an enchantment. And the spell you're flashbacking is Farseek. Like,
that's what's going on.
You're not breaking any speed records or anything like that.
It's, for reference, it's an overrun deck. It's a deck that tries to go wide with tokens by casting spells or by like doing I always forget the name of it.
Increasing Devotion.
Thank you.
Makes
exactly 10 humans. And then getting a Kamal out or
it's Kamal is your overrun as well, which is way harder to cast and more susceptible to removal. And it's an interesting category, this one, because your deck is doing the thing all the time. But what it's doing isn't making any headlines. Like, no one's going, whoa, most of the time. Sometimes it'll do the thing, and then everyone will be like, wow, you got there. You grinded for that, dude.
That's the thing. The thing you're getting to, though, will be like, whoa, you got there. You earned that. Like, oh, man, you cast Kamal. Of course you did. That came out of nowhere. You did 10 other spells before you cast Kamal.
But you're not getting any reactions like, whoa, that came out of nowhere.
Yes, because the ceiling is low, I think. I personally love this niche. I think this is probably the place where I like to play Commander the most.
I think this is, funnily enough, I've clocked on to the fact that you like this level.
Sure.
And I built Sally Sparrow very specifically with this in mind.
Interesting.
I tried to build a deck that sat within this high floor, low ceiling kind of category.
Sally Sparrow does that really well.
I'm glad that I achieved it.
Yeah.
That's good.
You know what's interesting is that the other day I was asking some of our Space Commanders whether they might have a request for us to make over one of their decks. The Space Commander patrons, for reference. The ones who are human, who we can talk to.
And the ones that we're allowed to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, I think I want you guys to build this, which we may do soon. But he said, I really hope it's a deck I can pull out to play against you.
Oh,
so
nice.
I think this is a thing that people are aware of going like, this is that. Like, I think even maybe me specifically.
This is your power
people go,
level,
this is Walt's spot. Because I think if I was to look at my decks, I think I certainly have decks that are the last category, the low floor, high ceiling. I'd put my Cascade deck in there.
Any glass cannon deck.
Yeah, any of those kind of decks
goes in that category.
As all the Lawbringer probably goes in there, although maybe the next category.
I think that might go in the next category, to be honest.
Pretty much every other deck I've built, I would put in this high floor, low ceiling thing.
Yeah, I think
in general.
It's interesting because, looking at category 2, which was low floor, high ceiling, so lots of variance. I just think the fact that this reduces variance, this category where we're having a high floor and a low ceiling, means that we're reducing variance, and like reducing variance is moving up the power scale in my mind. Like, when you build a CEDH deck, you want it to do the exact thing all the time. So then naturally you by reducing variance, you're increasing power a little bit. And I think that this is why this is category 3 or bracket 3 versus bracket 2.
Yeah, I'd say so. But speaking of CDH, we have to have a place to put all them.
True.
I think that there's more than just CDH in this category, but yes, you would expect bracket 4 is high floor, high ceiling.
This is the ballroom above Flinders Street Station.
Exactly right. These are some of the best decks that can be built. These are decks that pretty much always do the thing they're setting out to do, and the thing that they're setting out to do is really, really powerful.
Yeah.
A good chunk of the time.
I think you have very few decks in this category, but I would argue Azor.
I think Azor the Lawbringer belongs here. I think it pretty much always does what it's setting out to do, and the potential of that deck is very, very high.
Yeah, I wrote Phyleth down as a deck that I think might sit in this category, but after talking about the previous games just a minute ago, I'm like, maybe it sits in like category 3, which is kind of like, it always does the thing. Oh, and I think, no, category 2. It can absolutely
ballistic.
Do stupid stuff by turn 6.
I've seen it win on turn 6, I think, even.
So yeah, it's probably a category 2 deck then.
Yeah.
But I think that I like this area. I mean, CDH 100% falls into this category, right? Yep. I think that the fact that CDH decks are trying to do something very consistently and always do it as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
That's what CDH is. With the exception of like some variance decks, like decks like Atali. Ramping Atali out is a deck that sees play but is high variance.
Sure.
Also, turbo decks in some aspect are kind of high variance.
Sure.
Just because, like, you know, sometimes they have 8 mana on turn 2, cast ad nauseum, win game.
Sure.
But sometimes they struggle to even get to 3 mana.
The floor might be slightly lower for that deck in favor of the ceiling being much higher.
Much higher.
Right?
Like winning on turn 2 is a lot stronger than turn 4. Yeah.
But in general, the likelihood that you have a non-game might be slightly higher as well. So the floor drops down a bit. But yeah, it's interesting. I think even then, though, when you look at a CDH deck, and something that I have seen you specifically say when people posted in our Discord server, and they like have tried to brew a CDH deck, often the feedback that you and others give is there are a lot of cards here that don't win you the game. You know, like a CDH deck is kind of a race car. You know, it's like, what's this 50 grams doing back here? Get rid of this 50 grams. And that's kind of every part of the deck is under that level of scrutiny. It's like,
if we make this wing slightly more angled down, we get more drag resistance and all that kind of stuff.
Can we make it titanium? Can we thin it out? Like, and so I think when you're building for CDH, it's like, does this card either counterspell, you know, my opponent's counterspell? Does it draw me 10 cards, or does it say I win the game on it? And if it doesn't do one of those 3 things, it's tough to find a spot in a CDH deck for a card.
I think that this final category, tier 4, being high floor, high ceiling, is 100% easier to rule 0 than turn 2. Because you know what the deck does because it does it all the friggin' time.
Oh, then tier 2 you mean? Sorry,
yeah, it's easier to give a rule 0 than tier 2.
Yeah,
like you know what it does it all the time, and it does it really well.
Yeah.
But I think there is a weird thing that happens with tier 2 decks where people go, that's a really powerful deck. But they will never say that's a really powerful deck for this table. Yeah. And I think the reason why, and like this might differ from playgroup to playgroup, is these tier 4 decks, the high floor, high ceiling decks, they don't come out that often.
No, I think they usually get played where they should be played.
Correct.
And I think it's that there's less potential of like I didn't expect your deck would do that.
But the tier 2 decks, which is the low floor, high ceiling, super varied, these are the decks that people get upset at because they're like, you said your deck was this power level. No, this power level deck does that.
Yeah.
But like at the same, like how was I meant to describe it then? Like, do I only describe it at the high ceiling of what it's capable of doing?
Totally.
Because that's not what the whole deck is. You're not looking at it holistically. You're looking at it in a vacuum of the best this deck can do.
Yeah, I saw this card. Therefore, you're in a different power level to me because that power level, that card only appears in that other power level.
And Wizards of the Coast said that was bracket 4. That's a bracket 4 deck now. Yeah,
exactly right.
I think this is the thing about like even our system that we've created and like, you know, we think is like a better way of describing decks. Yeah. Still doesn't work.
Yeah, it has its problems for sure.
Yeah, because there is so much about describing power level of a format that is singleton, 100 cards, 4 player, and has the largest card pool available to it. And players and play groups have different ideas of what power is and what cards are powerful. Like, this is an absolutely impossible task to solve. So don't give Wizards of the Coast shit when they release the rest of the bracket system.
No, true.
This is hard.
They're doing their best. But yeah, I think it's the nature of defining anything by the cards that are in it. Like, I think that our power level, our discussion of how's your deck win, how's it consistent,
our Rule Zero template.
Yeah, our Rule Zero template. I do think, like, you get closer, but you're still often defining it based on the cards. Like, you know, you don't, when you say, how does my deck win? You tend to pull out your best win cons, not your worst ones.
Yeah, you do.
And anyway, I think maybe this isn't something that will be feasible for you to do in a pre-game conversation, but understand when you pull out and show someone, my deck can do this, that there is a hidden context which you could attempt to explain of, but it also can do this a good chunk of the time.
And it does this 1 out of every 10 games.
Yeah.
It does this 5 out of every 10 games.
Yeah, that consistency question might be one to highlight more. How is your deck consistent? Really try and hone in on that, maybe.
It's an impossible task, and I think that as long as you are having a good pre-game conversation with your play group and your pod at that very moment and just trying your damn best to make a fun game for everyone, you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Use our Rule Zero template, our tier system, Wizards of the Coast bracket system, your own system.
Yeah, whatever.
As long as you're trying, you're a good Commander player.
Absolutely. Look, power level is a tricky problem with Commander, and there will never be a singular universal solution to it. However, if you better understand the ceiling and floor of your decks and the cards within them, you'll find it a little easier to carve out your niche and find some like-minded folks to enjoy this wonderful format with. So, Space Commanders, command received.
Damn. I really thought we were going to solve it. At the start of this episode, I was like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to solve it. And then by the end of it, we were like, well, it's just try, I guess.
I really thought we were going to solve it because we said we were going to solve it about 4 times.
Yeah. It kept you listening, though, didn't it?
Yeah, we got you.
Kept you engaged. This is audio clickbait. We gotcha.
To you out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of ceilings and floors? And did you believe us when we lied to you?
Yeah.
Tell us.
If you're gonna use them, this system, tell us how it went.
Yeah, true. Definitely.
Tell us we were terribly wrong in our assessments. You can tell us on all the social media platforms at Get Commanded everywhere. But the real cool place to talk to us is live in person on Twitch at twitch.tv/getcommanded. Yeah, that is the coolest place. We have chats with our fans of the show.
Definitely.
We pause gameplay just to answer questions and just hang out. It is a chill time. Long Commander games, but it's because we're talking to all of you guys.
Yeah, and it's also because we're playing in usually tier 2, where most of my tier 3, where most of my decks sit.
Or for me, likely tier 3, the Hive tier 2, which is all the variants.
Definitely.
But yeah, and definitely, like we said at the top of this episode, go subscribe to YouTube because we are definitely looking at doing more stuff in video form.
Yep, lots to come. Definitely over there. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page. It's linked in the show notes. It's the absolute best way to support the Get Commanded podcast and our endeavors as we move towards YouTube. We'd like to thank our patrons, Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, Dyer, Dylan Norg, Bertie, Crazy Logic, Benjamin, and Henry Solis. And an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under, who support us in the Space Commander tier. You are the best.
You are the best. And I don't think we mention this a lot, but if you would like your name read out at the end of every episode, at our lowest tier, you get your name read out.
Speaking of tiers.
Yeah.
Every tier of Patreon, you will get your name read out. It's
even
true.
tier 1, which is jank. You can subscribe at the jank level. And also, we should thank Palms Off Gaming, our wonderful sponsor of this podcast. These guys create awesome deck boxes, sleeves, binders, and other gaming accessories. Check them out, palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded to get 10% off your order and support us, Get Commanded, at the same time. palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded for your sleeves.
Yeah, get some sleeves. Sleeve them up.
Yeah,
sleeve them
and
up good.
inner sleeve them. Then put them in top loaders. Then put them in one of those fancy maglock cases. Palms Off are really good at
they
all
have
that stuff,
all
actually.
of those things.
Yeah.
If you have something that's very precious to you, Palms Off have a security system for that card.
I would argue if you managed to get Post Malone's One Ring, they would be able to inner sleeve it, top load it, put it in a maglock, put it in a box, put it in a safe, and then keep it in their warehouse with 3 armed guards and 2 German shepherds to protect it.
I think budget cuts might just be 1 German shepherd.
I might have a quick chat to Darcy to see if what's available.
See what's available for you and your copy of the One Ring. Post Malone, we know you listen.
All right.
Yeah.
End of the episode.
Yes.
It's Planeswalking time.
Yeah.
What are you up to, Walt?
I have been obsessed with a very dangerous other collecting hobby.
Oh, are you talking about what's on your wrist?
Watches.
Yes.
Watches.
So in the past, like 2 months, Walt and I have realized we have another thing in common.
Yes.
And it's the appreciation of a good watch.
Yes.
And for like literally, I think it was like 2 episodes ago.
Sure.
We sat in front of the computer before we recorded, just looking at watches
Yep.
for like 45 minutes.
Yep, and we'll probably do the same after this.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm really, really in on it. I basically, I
You've
had,
spent a few hunch at this point.
Yeah, I had about $400 and I wanted to get like a new watch because I had this crappy old watch I bought from ASOS years ago. Just completely went kaput. My Casio went kaput at the same time, so I had no watches. And I was like, I have a bit of money. I actually want to treat myself to a nice watch for once.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a budget of $400. I'll just get one, and that'll be my one watch. That's all I'll ever need.
Yep.
And then...
Anyway.
Look, I've only bought one more since then, which is the one you can see on my wrist right now, which is a cute
Well,
little...
they can't see it. I can see it.
No, you can see it. It's a cute little, very queer-looking Casio, which I really appreciate.
It's got like a pearlescent-y kind of face to it. It's really cool.
It is really cool. But yes, I've been obsessively researching. I can guarantee I have not finished purchasing watches.
No.
It's just a matter of pacing myself. Thankfully, I've found some of the... You know how you like very quickly when you're in any hobby, you find the like level-headed people?
Yeah.
I found like a level-headed YouTuber who was like, buy one watch a year. And I was like, okay, that I can do.
Is this the guy that wears like the blazer and in a white room with the white table in all of his videos?
I don't think so.
I got to show you him.
He's more like dad style. He's often got like a sort of zip up
fleece,
like a fleece, like a sweater vest or not a sweater vest, sorry, just a sweater.
I got to show you this guy that I've followed for a while because he's really good. He talks a lot about high end watches.
Okay, that's probably why I haven't found him.
But
shocker, I'm also interested in budgeting.
The cool thing is though, he'll be like, here's the Omega Speedmaster Lunar Lander Edition. It's like $6,000.
Sure.
If you like the style, here is a budget
alternative
version.
Sure,
yeah,
that's nice.
So I liked him for that reason. But
I've been watching a lot of like best watches under $100, best watches under $400, and stuff
it is
like
an
that.
absolute wormhole. You can get sucked into it. Like and like it's almost impossible of a scale. Like the floor is is like a Swatch watch for $20, and the ceiling is like a Rolex for 100,000, like millions more.
I have discovered it goes up to, I think the highest watch I have seen. I've watched a really funny video, which was I show a bunch of strangers who don't know anything about watches. I tried to see what they would how they would react
to
different
scale,
watches, and they didn't know anything about them. And they were like, they were looking at a watch and they're like, I don't really like this design. It looks kind of cheap. It's probably like $300. And he was like, that would be a $450,000 watch.
There was one watch, I can't remember who it was by. I feel like it's by one of the like Middle Eastern brands that are like really precocious, like really Rococo watches.
Yeah.
And it had like a pendulum in the watch, and it's like, you
know,
like a Coke can thickness on your wrist.
Yeah.
And it was like, $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and was like, I don't want a budget alternative of that. That looks shit.
Yes.
It looks so bad.
It's a real problem. I am really glad I don't have more money than I do, because people spend obscene amounts of money.
Oh, yeah.
I saw this post on Reddit of someone who was like, hey guys, been collecting for a month and a half. What do you think of my collection so far? There were like 10 watches.
Oh my God.
Several of which I know for a fact, based on my research, are worth like $2,000 or $3,000.
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
insane.
over 6 weeks? Like, we all know someone like this who
I've
plays
got
Magic.
3 watches, by the way.
That's a reasonable number.
That's as much as I got.
But yeah, like we all know someone who plays Magic and does this, right? Like it gets into the hobby and then they come to you a week later and they're like, hey, I'm trying to build a CEDH deck.
I've already got this Mana Crypt, Mox Opal,
One
Lion's Eye
ring.
Diamond.
Yeah.
And,
I just bought a Time Twister. Is this card any good? It's like, put
can't
your
even
wallet
touch
away. No, look, I've found it really fascinating learning about different movements and bracelets and stuff. And look, it's mostly like I've only bought 2 watches. I
Yeah.
just like looking at them and being like,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool. Maybe someday.
I really like the style that you've gravitated towards as well, because it's very different to mine. And when you send me watches that you're like, what do you think of this? I'm like, oh yeah, I would never consider that, because I'm also like generally just a bigger dude than you. So like,
I mean, wrist size is a big thing with watches. Like
is how they look on the wrist.
Yeah, how it looks on the wrist. And like, your wrist, I suspect, would be quite a bit bigger than mine.
Yes, definitely. And
genetics.
I think you go for like a nice thin, clean watch face.
Yeah,
thin
often
handles.
dress watches.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of divers watches.
Yeah.
I'm a
Tend
huge
to be
fan.
Blockier, a bit more strong.
Usually titanium braced
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I like a bit of a chunk on my watch,
Yeah.
but I love the fact that we found another thing that we have in common. Because I've not had anyone to talk about my fascination with watches.
Oh, good. Well,
we were on a Discord call like the other night, and I was like, we were scrolling through the Omega James Bond webpage.
Oh, that's right.
And we were
trying to
looking
work
at,
out,
we were trying to figure out which of James Bond's watches we would have.
Yes.
Like which one
we
you would
did.
try.
Yeah. I can't remember. We were looking at just the Daniel Craig ones, and even that
Yeah.
was tough. Like, he's only worn Omega Seamasters. And
Yeah.
even within that, there's like 8 different Omega Seamasters he's worn.
And they're all bespoke as well.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like bespoke watches for the films.
Crazy.
I would 100% have the Casino Royale blue Seamaster.
Oh, that's
one.
right. That was very
Yeah,
classy. That was very
love
unique,
that.
Definitely. Well, that's all we have time for. We'll see you next Friday. Let me check the watch. For another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Good synchronized watches.
Yep. And
Goodbye, Commander players.
bye.